everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. I'm your host, Ruben Mendive, and today we have a new guest here, and I'm so excited to have them on. So I like to have my guests introduce themselves, so your name and how you identify for the people at home.
Hello, everybody. My name is Josie Meléndez. I am 24 years old. I am a Puerto Rican, I like to say writer because when I say screenwriter, I feel like I'm putting myself in a box when I try to do so many things at once, which is not the best thing, but that's what we're here for. But yeah, in terms, Puerto Rican writer, and I identify as she, her.
So I like to follow up by asking people, where are you from? So what's the short version? What's the long version?
So short version, born and raised in Puerto Rico. I currently live in Carolina, Puerto Rico, which is this whole thing. Like, I laugh at it because the thing is that my address says San Juan, Puerto Rico, but we vote for the Carolina municipality. I'll never understand it, but I just like saying Carolina, Puerto Rico, just to represent. And long story. So my family, born and raised here as well. I wish I could do an ancestry test because sometimes my grandfather tells me stories, but it's like bits and pieces. And each time I'm trying to connect the dots and I still haven't been able to, but I'm very interested because sometimes he's like, we came from the Canary Islands, but it's like way before him. So I'm very curious to find that out one day. But shorter version would be, we were all born here. My family is from Vega Alta and Vega Baja, which a lot of people might recognize as where Lin-Manuel Miranda is from. Then I grew up in San Juan, in the metropolitan area. So I'm very much like, quote unquote, a city girl. My father's side of the family, actually, they're from San Juan as well. But my father, because my parents were separated, so my father lived in Rio Grande, which is closer to El Yunque National Rainforest. So sometimes I would go and visit him and I would stay there. So I like to think like I grew up in Carolina and Rio Grande, but mostly Carolina. So yeah, city girl.
How would you describe the island to someone that's never been there?
I always like to say Puerto Rico is in fact beautiful. It's called, like, we call it the Island of Enchantment, which is like tourism talk, but there is a charm to it. There are so many beautiful things that often get ignored, especially growing up here. I'll never forget. I was in 4th grade and a lot of us, we were kids. So a lot of us were like, I want to go to Disney this summer. And one of our teachers just got really mad. And she's like, you should do internal tourism. Like, you live in Puerto Rico. It's such a beautiful island. You should get to know your history and your culture, which of course we were kids. So all we saw Disney on TV. So what else did we want to do other than go to Disney World? But it is truly a wonderful place. And I did actually work in tourism. So the best way I can describe it is the north, like metropolitan area, is very touristy. It's usually the only thing people tend to see when they visit the island. And what I would usually recommend to guests would be to go to the West Coast. The West Coast is usually where Americans that come to live here go to live, especially it's 2 places, Aguadilla and Rincon, which they're very well known for surf competitions and like island life, quote unquote. But it's very beautiful. There's a beach that if anyone can Google, it's called Crash Boat Beach, which is my favorite beach here. And it's literally called Crash Boat because the fishermen, when they're on the boats coming back to the shore, they literally crash on the shore. So it's a literal name and it's very cool. Except a little scary because we were in the water one day and then the fisherman literally crashed the boat beside us on the shore and we were like, oh, okay, that's normal. But then the East Coast is my favorite as well because Puerto Rico actually it's one of the few places in the world that has bioluminescence. So bioluminescent bays are there and they're very beautiful, especially we have 2 small islands on the coast that are also municipalities. I'm giving it you can tell I worked in tourism.
Listen, I need all this.
Yes. So the good thing about the one in Vieques, it's super beautiful. You can actually see the bioluminescence. Of course, we're in COVID, so I don't know if they're doing this still, but they used to have like glass bottom kayaks and because you can't get in because we actually lost our bioluminescence for a while. And we think it was due to people, there were a lot of factors like lack of oxygen because they're very sensitive creatures. And also tourists were getting in the water with sunblock. at night, which I still don't understand. So that was messing with them. So now they had like glass bottom boats and it was very serene and beautiful. And like, I would say Puerto Rico is just full of once in a lifetime experiences. That's the best way I can describe it. But also, of course, political things that every place has, which I won't get into right now, maybe later, because I do include a lot of politics in my writing.
No, listen, I'm so excited to go. I really wanted to go this year and it just isn't going to happen. So I'm curious about like your childhood. So how would you describe you growing up in San Juan, Carolina? Like, what was it like?
I was so quiet. And you might think I'm not because I have a podcast, which surprises me. But I was such a quiet child to the point that everyone would always be like, why are you so quiet? I was very shy. And mostly it was due to, I was actually diagnosed with an anxiety disorder when I finished high school. So my entire life, I was actually this very anxious child, but I didn't know. Which sometimes I wish I could go back and be like, hey, this is what's happening, because it would have made so many things easier. But I was definitely that anxious child. I had a lot of friends, which was good in part, but I was often like very closed off to myself, very reserved. But still, despite that, I was such an overachiever as a child. So like 14 to 17-year-old me in high school, I was like vice president of the student council. I founded and was the president of a book club. I was that type A kid that was involved in almost everything. And it was just a very interesting time because high school, I went to Catholic high school. So it was just a very competitive environment. And it's been very interesting to unlearn that because even like between friends, we would be very competitive with each other. So being able to like shed that during my college years was such a blessing and such a relief because it does get very old quickly, feeling like everyone is like looking over their shoulder at each other. So I think that was one of the hardest parts of that, but it was a very interesting time. And I am grateful. I had a good education and we were like the drama kids that you see in films. We were very geeky, like watching all the YA films and going to like the Catching Fire premieres. So we were those kids. I was very into like young adult books and I still am, but I was like that hardcore Tumblr child.
And so like, what'd you do after high school? Like, did you know sort of what you wanted to pursue? Like, did you have a plan? Did things go according to plan?
So no, they did not. I learned at a very early age that planning or making any kinds of plans, life is going to laugh at you, which is a good lesson to learn because oftentimes we try to control everything and it's nice to learn that it's okay not to have control over everything. But I was accepted into Penn State and I was originally going to go and I was going to do an English literature degree and international relations in politics. And just some financial troubles happened and I couldn't afford it anymore. So I decided to stay and I enrolled in the University of Puerto Rico, the Rio Piedras campus. La UP, shout out. And it was a very fun time because it was entirely different to my high school experience. And at first it took a while to adjust, but after I got the hang of it, I met so many nice people, which are the people I speak to the most still to this day, who they keep joking like, I hope you make it big so you can like maintain us. And I'm like, I'll get you your monthly allowance. Just give me like 2 more years. And I studied English literature there. And I do have, I like to joke that I'm half a politician because I have half a degree in political science. And I can still finish it, but I don't think it's for me right now. I'd rather just, again, keep my politics to my writing. But it's mostly, I didn't mention it earlier. My family is just like, they were in the legislature. They were lawyers. My family's like full of doctors. So deciding to be a writer at such an early age was very weird for me, but I never doubted it. I always was like, oh yes, this is what I want to do. Like, it feels cheesy, but I'm like, this is my purpose in life. Well, after I graduated undergrad, I then went to the Savannah College of Art and Design for a Master of Fine Arts in Dramatic Writing, which was a very strange decision because I was working in tourism at that time and it was a slow day. And I started Googling, film and TV and writing degrees. And I came across that one. And the next day I was in a class and we were talking about that. And a classmate of mine was like, you should look into SCAD. And I was like, I was just looking at SCAD yesterday. Is this a sign? So I enrolled. And it was very interesting because I did the entire process during Hurricane Maria. So that was very interesting, trying to find Wi-Fi and being like writing letters of, like trying to get letters of recommendation was so interesting. And trying to get the transcripts. So it was definitely an uphill battle, but I ended up getting early admission. Having gone from not being able to afford undergrad at Penn State to being able to have gone to SCAD in grad school was definitely fulfilling, especially because you usually get to see those opportunities for like minorities and especially people from outside the United States to be able to be there and also be surrounded by, I was so surprised by the amount of other Puerto Rican writers in my department. So that was you feel welcome. And it felt like a full circle moment.
Yeah, so I am curious. I think the thing that always fascinates me about like Puerto Rico is like, I think, and this also happens sometimes with Cubans, like this like citizenship, like a lot of Cubans get it through like asylum and you know, Puerto Ricans get it through birth. So which is a very different story than the rest of like Latin America and like the Latinx community. Yeah. So I am curious about the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico and like how does that manifest in like the world you're walking around in?
It's definitely in my life 24/7. I'm constantly thinking about it, even if I'm not doing it on purpose. It's always in my mind, especially because it does affect us so greatly every single day. We often say that Puerto Ricans do have an identity crisis because it's the ni de aquí ni de allá kind of feeling all the time where we have U.S. citizenship, but we're not U.S. Americans. We identify as Puerto Rican, but we're also not from South America, but we are Latin America. It's this whole constant wondering, who am I? What am I? And it's kind of sad because it's not just me. A lot of people feel that way. And it was very interesting, specifically this past presidential, like 4 years, especially with the way that the president treated us often. Like, let's not forget the paper towels. And yeah, it's very curious to wonder what exactly we are. But at the end of the day, it's just a complete divide. Everyone's going to have a different opinion because, of course, some people want independence, some people want to stay the way we are, and some people want statehood. Recently, we had our own personal elections, and it's so difficult to have a conversation about who's going to be our next governor without talking about status. It's literally everywhere. And with the federal government, I know AOC is currently trying to push for, I forgot the name, but they're trying to like resolve the issue because I think Biden also mentioned that he wants to see what we want. And recently, most of the people voted for statehood, the majority, quote unquote, but a lot of people are still like, you can see that it's not a clear majority. It's only like 1 to 2% difference. So that's a problem that is constantly being brought up here. It's definitely, it's hard not to talk about that when you're talking about Puerto Rico. So I really thank you for asking that because, I mean, there are people still in the United States that don't know we're part of the United States.
I don't know. I think it's very American to be like, well, of course they want to be part of us. And like, there are even like political advantages to having Puerto Rico be a state and like all these things. Although I feel like Puerto Rico might, I don't know, sometimes it from the outside to me feels like Democrat on the outside, Republican on the inside. Like,
yeah.
Like, I feel like everyone's like, Puerto Rico will get 2 like Democratic senators. I was like, are we sure about this?
No, Puerto Rico is so conservative, let me tell you. I mean, we just voted for a man. Well, not we. I'm not including myself. I didn't vote for him. But the island just elected a man from the same party that we just threw out like 2 summers ago. like one summer ago. It's just very weird. And most of these people, I mean, there was a man running this year that was very pro anti-gay propaganda. And it just makes you so sad that we're still seeing that, not just in the United States, but everywhere in the world. So, and seeing people support those kinds of people, especially there was one in one of the debates, he was very rude to one of the female hosts that was asking questions at the debate. He was very rude, and it was mostly like that kind of mentality that's like women should be in their place. And people were supporting him, and it's very upsetting. So yeah, Puerto Rico seems democratic on the outside, but it's unfortunately very conservative on the inside.
And and it's been in the news. I think maybe like Hurricane Maria was like the first time that it was in the United States, like very like top of mind. But it also feels like the politics became more apparent, like the upheaval, the protest, like became more nationalized news. So I'm curious, like, was it like that before Hurricane Maria? Like, what do you think sparked all this, especially just from like our understanding of like what was going on there?
After Hurricane Maria, I think it just became a moment to use that as a platform to be able to get our issues out there. I remember Bernie Sanders showed up at my university and we were able to see him, and it was all like, freedom for Puerto Rico and free, because we have a lot of there's so much history in Puerto Rico when it comes to like the federal government, but we have a lot of people that were thrown in jail because of their feelings towards the United States and their actions against the United States. So he was like, free Oscar Lopez, and he was saying a lot of things, and the students were loving it. So I think Hurricane Maria definitely put us on the map to be able to persuade people in Congress when it came to political agenda. And we still kind of are a political agenda when it comes to mentioning us. And that was also, I noticed that during these elections, that was a focal point when it came to Biden's campaign.
Yeah, and it also seemed that like there's like a sense of like Puerto Rico before and after Hurricane Maria, and I've just gotten the sense of it just from even looking into it and talking to some people that I don't know, like it was like like the refresh button was hit, like the slate was quite clean, but like not in a good way, like in a way where it was just like devastation.
No, because we were already in such a horrible debt. And then Hurricane Maria happened, and there was an irresponsibility from the response from FEMA. I mean, Trump's whole spiel about like water, big water. And it's like, it's an island, sir. What did you expect? Our own government mishandled funds, and they found a lot of water just abandoned in a warehouse. So all those things played into how we were viewed and how we viewed ourselves. But after Hurricane Maria, you could tell that people had changed. And I remember there was a Yo no me quito movement, which I think Edith mentioned during her episode with you. A lot of people just started waving, like people had 1 to 2 or 3 flags hanging from their cars just to represent like Puerto Rican pride and how we're not leaving, which is also an interesting fact because their flag used to be illegal back until like the 60s. So that contributes a lot. Like if you see a lot of Puerto Ricans wearing their flags or like tattooed on their chest or something, it's because their flag was illegal due to a gag law. So it's not just because like it is a pretty flag, but there is a political history to it. Like it's been a long time coming. It's not something that happened now, but now is when people are starting to notice it more. And Hurricane Maria definitely, I think, was the catalyst for that.
Yeah. So like getting back to you. So when you went to SCAD, were you like still in Puerto Rico or did you go to Georgia for it? Like how did that work?
I was living in Puerto Rico and I accepted the offer. So I quit my job and moved to Georgia, which was a hard decision to make. But the good part is that I actually like my half brother, which he's a brother to me, but he grew up until like 7 in Puerto Rico. Then he went to live in Athens, Georgia with his mom. And my dad stayed back in Puerto Rico. So he grew up, he's an Athens boy. He was raised in Georgia. So that was also very comforting because he was just a 4-hour drive away. And that was very comforting. So it made the decision a lot easier. I found a really nice roommate and I moved to Georgia and I lived there for 2 years. And then I graduated and came back to Puerto Rico to be with my mom during the pandemic.
And so like what are like the biggest differences you noticed being in Georgia? It's the South. It's like very much with the Puerto Rican flag. We are the US flag here,
Yeah.
nonstop. So like what did you notice the difference between like being in like the United States as opposed to like growing up and living in Puerto Rico?
My first impression of Georgia, like I've been to Georgia before, but living there was entirely new. And I remember getting an Uber from the airport to the hotel I was going to stay at while I got my apartment. And the Uber driver had a snapback like cap on the dashboard and it had a Confederate flag on it. And I was like, why? So that was my first impression of Georgia. But afterwards, it got better. It did get better. Savannah is surprisingly full of a lot of Puerto Ricans. We're everywhere, I swear. And it was very welcoming. There was one guy that would play the trumpet in Forsyth Park. And I remember walking and he just stops me. He's playing and he stops me. He's like, "Tú eres Boricua, like you're Boricua, right?" And I'm like, "Sir, how did you know?" And he's like, "I can tell." So despite there was a severe culture shock for me and it was very overwhelming. In times I was homesick so often because the food is different. I can't hear the coqui frog anywhere. Here the houses are made of cement. Over there it's wood. So I could hear my upstairs neighbors stomping. There were a lot of things that were very overwhelming. But then I'd have those moments where I would find someone, like even if it wasn't Puerto Rican, I had a lot of friends that were from Colombia and Venezuela and Cuba. So from time to time, I would find those people and they made it a lot easier. Definitely like finding your community and finding people that share your same values and a little bit of your culture helps so much.
And like, what do you feel like you took away from going to SCAD? Like if someone's thinking of attending, like what did you go there for and what do you think you got out of it?
So I went for dramatic writing, which is essentially we learned how to write for film, television, playwriting, virtual reality, game design, like everything. If you were interested in writing for something, the professors would help you. So my biggest takeaway from SCAD is that people are very nice and people do want to help you. Especially my department is very well known for having professors that genuinely care about you, want to nurture you and help you grow and like help you have all the tools you need for when you leave SCAD to be able to enter the entertainment industry, because it's not an easy industry to get into. And they know that and they let you know that. So I think that's the best part of it. Again, back to like high school, I did not feel any competitiveness. That everyone genuinely wanted to help each other. The only thing I would say is that if you do know about screenwriting, writers groups help a lot because SCAD is very expensive. I paid almost the entirety of my time there with loans. So it's very expensive, but you do learn a lot. If you don't know anything, I got to SCAD without knowing anything about screenwriting. And I came out super confident in my writing, which is good. If that's what you want to do, I would recommend it. The only other thing would be that SCAD specializes in networking. So you do get a lot of connections. If you do make a lot of friends, those people will most likely, I still talk to a lot of people I went to SCAD with, and we're constantly brainstorming on projects or helping each other out, reading each other's material. So you do get nice, lasting connections that will probably follow you into the industry when you get there. And they also have like the Savannah Film Festival, which was very exciting because I'd never been to a festival before, and being able to sit at panels. And I got a VIP pass for one of them, and that was very exciting. So those opportunities are there, and there are so many more. It's just about going after them and trying to get them because they genuinely want to help you. The only thing is that you have to put a lot of the effort to get that help.
I'm curious, like, because you went to like undergraduate and graduate for writing. So I'm curious of like, where did the writing come in for you? Like, when did you know, like from like, let's follow the through line. Like, where did it sort of start for you and where did you decide, oh, this is something I want to pursue professionally?
At my elementary school, they used to do these author nights where we would make our own little books out of construction paper and loose leaf paper. So that is the earliest memory I have of like, oh, I'm an author. So going from that, growing up, I did not like reading at all. And there came a point where it was specifically 8th grade that I had a teacher that really liked my essay writing. And she told me, you should pursue creative writing. Whenever I'd write a story, I would give it to her. And one day she asked me to go to like meet with her in our classroom during lunch. And I went thinking I was in trouble. And she said, no, you're fine. I just wanted to tell you that I think you should pursue this professionally. And at first I was very confused. I was like, writing professionally? What are you talking about? Because again, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for the longest time and like follow the family. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I got into writing. And again, I used to do it often ever since I was little, but it wasn't until that point that I thought, oh, let's do this professionally. So I would write stuff for her and she would give me critiques and help me improve in certain aspects. And then when I was 15, like around 10th grade, I started writing a novel, which looking back, I'm like, what are you thinking? Who do you think you are? But I started writing a sci-fi YA dystopian novel because that was everything. And I started sending query letters to like these well-known agents as if like, again, who do I think I am? And it was a very fun experience though, because after a while I was like, wait, I'm actually doing this. Like people do this. This is actually a thing. And it was a very tough decision, but around the time I was going to graduate high school, I just decided I am going to pursue writing. And originally it was going to be in publishing. So that's why I studied English literature, because my whole thing was books. I started reading more. I started writing more stories that reminded me of the young adult novels I was reading. But then fast forwarding, when I graduated college, I had taken a literature class, but the professor, he had studied at California. So he would mix in literature with film. And I just found it so interesting. And I would meet up with him after class and ask him about his experiences. And I was just so enamored because I had always loved film, but I never saw myself writing for it or television. Like first it was me getting used to wanting to write for film. Now it's me getting used to writing for television. And it was a long journey. It was a really long journey, but I sort of feel like I always knew. It was just what kind of writer I wanted to be. But right now it's like feature and television. So that's what I've stuck with for now.
What are like the stories you like to tell? You know, like what are the themes you see coming up constantly? Like what are the stories that you're attracted to?
So I usually do, there was this meme going around where people were like putting images of films from other directors. And I know Almodovar was like, mommy issues, mommy issues, mommy issues. Mine is daddy issues. So my writing often, because I had a very complicated relationship with my father and I loved him very much. But again, it was a constant back and forth. And again, my parents were separated. So growing up with that was very much a part of my life and who I was and a little bit of still who I am. When he actually passed away in 2016, so to heal that, I decided to write an entire feature about us. So definitely daddy issues in most of my writing. But then I like speaking to people that don't feel like they're good enough. So I definitely deal a lot with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Politics, oppressive and conservative environments, again, especially magical realism, which magical realism, if people don't know, it was like the concept was coined in Germany, but it is a South American, Latin American genre and form of writing that it surfaced as people writing these magical realist stories to be able to criticize the government and the oppressive nature that they were facing. So that's one of the main things that I like to write about. Food and mental health and mental illness. I like to include that in there too.
The writing scene, the theater scene, the performance scene in like Puerto Rico, like what's it like?
Here, one of the reasons I went to SCAD as well is because we do have a film industry, but it is not supported. It is decaying a bit. There are no funds. Our government does not support it. Most of the tax laws and everything here benefits mostly outside productions that come from the United States to film here. They get a lot of tax cuts that local directors do not get. So a lot of the performance and the art scene that comes from here is mostly theater. Like theater is our reason to live, basically. And people uphold theater to such a high standard here. And we don't have a TV industry. It's very stale. We have like a few programs, but it's very sad. I wish we did have more because there are so many talented and creative people. There are so many influencers that are doing their thing online because that's the only way they can actually get their talent and their ideas out there, which is also, I thank God for those tools. But I wish we had a better film industry. It's just very sad. But we do have my cousin, she actually made a film called Extraterrestres, which she like worked with South America, so that helped a lot. So we definitely get a lot of help from South American film industries and the film industry in Spain, which is good that these communities and these countries are helping each other for art.
So like, what have you been up to after, you've left SCAD, like professionally, creatively, like what have you been doing?
I have my podcast, Film Posers, which I just woke up one day and I was like, I want to make a podcast. And I assembled my other 3 co-hosts and a chat, and I was like, hello, I have gathered you all here today because I want to make a podcast. Because we were always talking about film and television, and we just decided to make Film Posers. So that's what I've been dedicating myself most to nowadays, trying to get a job in the industry. So that's another thing I've been up to, waking up every morning, looking at LinkedIn, like, ooh, let's see what's fresh today. Mostly while I've been trying to get into that, I've just been trying to also get my name out there. So I've been contributing to Shuffle Online. I'm now a critic for Full Circle Cinema. I like to often talk with Rosa and Kat from LatinX Lens because they are so knowledgeable and I just absolutely love them. On the side, film and TV criticism has definitely taken most of my time, especially now, like with cherry picks. And we've been able to grow Film Posers through that by reviewing films, interviewing directors and producers and writers, which has also been very entertaining and very fun and a wonderful learning experience. And just keeping myself busy. I that's mostly been it. I'm one of those people that I don't like to wait for opportunities. I like to create them. So it's mostly been just flexing that creative muscle.
Yeah. And, I was very impressed. That's sort of how you came up on my radar with Film Posers, the podcast. I've listened to it. I definitely, like, y'all made me feel like I was 1,000 years old. Just
No.
Just because it's like, I think I listened to one episode where it's like some classic movies from our childhood, and it was like Mean Girls, and I'm like, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a childhood movie. Okay, I feel like it was more for teenage for me, but okay.
Yeah, I think I'm the oldest of the group. I think I might be the oldest. We're all 90s babies, but I know I'm older than I'm older than Ana and Gabriela, which are my co-hosts. I think Juan and I might be the same age, but yeah, we're youngins.
Yeah, and I love it because y'all popped up out of nowhere, and now you're interviewing like the directors for like Con Mucho Amor and getting like early reviews and screeners and talking about films before they're even out. So it's like very profesh, very like, I feel like you've definitely like carved out a little niche for yourself, and like not only just like Latinx filmmaking, but like filmmaking at large, where it's like people sort of know to like talk to you about it and like go to you because, you know, you've sort of created this space where it's focusing on a particular audience that can be both very like niche, quote unquote, in terms of Latinx filmmaking, but also like very broad as we all watch everything also. So
Yeah.
Kudos to that. So like, how did y'all meet? How did this group come together?
Yes, thank you. So we all went to the same university, and actually I was friends with Gabriela, and I knew Ana and Juan, and we'd crossed paths before, but I knew Gabriela was often talking with Juan and Ana about film. And then sometimes I'd talk to Gabriela about certain things, and she'd be like, oh yeah, I talked to them about this. They thought this. And I'm like, huh, maybe we should all talk about films. So I gathered them into that group chat, and then we started talking about films and like quote unquote poetic cinema. I wanted to make the podcast, so I brought it up to them. It was all calculated. No. um, so I brought it up, and it took a while. It felt like a business meeting. We looked at the pros and the cons, what could happen, what we wanted from it, and we made a plan. And eventually we started researching podcasts, looking at other film podcasts. We started researching equipment, platforms, and that's how we found Anchor, which was very easy for us because it helps anyone be able to make a podcast and get their point out there without, because I didn't know much about podcasting, even though I wanted to make a podcast. So Anchor made it a lot easier. It's just, we could record from anywhere because I wasn't in Puerto Rico at the time, so we couldn't meet up. I was in Georgia, so it helped us a lot with being able to do remote recording. And it just went off from there. I wear a lot of hats. But it's because, again, I'm an overachiever, so I'm like press contact. I'm constantly emailing people. I mean, the Mucho Mucho Amor interview actually was because we DM'd Christina. We're like, hi, we are film posters. This is what we do. We are Puerto Ricans, and we would really like to talk about Mucho Mucho Amor. So she sent us her Netflix contacts, and we emailed them, and they were like, oh, would you like to talk to all three of them? And we're like, yes, the more the merrier. So that was one of those moments where I sat back and I thought, wow, this actually happened, and we actually did this. And we started to take ourselves more seriously. And I started to look out there I started to see more possibilities for us. And that was when I started, like, I emailed the Savannah Film Festival and I told them, hey, I was an alumni and I would really like to cover this event. This is who we are. And we got back from that. Now we're trying to get press credentials for Sundance, which I'm really crossing my fingers for that because that would be very nice, because they're doing satellite screenings this year, and some of them are actually going to be here, which, again, despite our relationship with the United States, we don't often get included in these kinds of things. So to see satellite screenings in Puerto Rico, we like started screaming out of joy. So it's just been a lot of creating those opportunities and imagining the possibilities and just going out and reaching for them.
Yeah, exactly. No, I see some of these interviews. I'm like, how did they get this? And I took 2 seconds of like, maybe they're just asking, like,
yeah,
they're just making contact, be like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and like, do you want to work together? Like, it's really that simple. It's not like a huge secret.
Yeah, I wish I could do that more with when it comes to my own writing. I'm still very shy when it comes to, because these are industry professionals. And sometimes I wish I could just be like, hi, Tanya Saracho. But I will never do that because it feels different for me when it comes to film posers. I'm more secure when it comes to our craft and what we're doing and who we are and what we stand for. Because even though I do want to, like, my main focus and my main purpose and my main dream is to be a writer and to put more Latinx stories from my point of view and the experience I've had growing up in Puerto Rico and those of the people around me. But I loved doing film and TV criticism because while I'm working to get over here with putting these stories out there, I can boost other people's stories, which has been my favorite part because we've had Latinx writers send us emails like, hey, I have this new short. Would you guys like to watch it and maybe promote it? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I want to support you. I want to promote you. I honestly, I feel like that girl in Mean Girls is like, I just want us all to be happy and eat cake. Like
Yeah.
that's what that's essentially what I really want. I just want our stories and our people to be uplifted, and if I can do that with film posers, then I feel like I've done a good job.
I did want to talk to you about Twitter.
Mhm.
Because even in that Mean Girl scenario, the person is shouting, "You don't even go here." It's
Yeah.
probably Twitter.
Yes.
Um, so I see you on my Twitter feed constantly. I see all the
Mhm.
posers. So I want to talk to you about your relationship with Twitter. So like the
Mhm.
good, the bad, the ugly. Like what do you think it's doing for you? What are you getting out of it? Like why do you do it?
So my relationship with I've always had Twitter, which seems weird, but yeah, I'm late millennial. So I was born pre-internet, but internet has been in my life for most of it. So I'm in that weird phase where I'm like millennial but Gen Z. So Twitter has been in my life for a long part of it. At first it was just, oh, a thought here, a thought there. Look at me being a silly teenager. But then I got to grad school and we had to take an online presence class
Mm,
because they wanted to emphasize that a lot of like to be able to emerge in the industry and be able to create a platform for yourself, you do have to have a sort of online presence. That it's very important. You sometimes it works for some people, and sometimes Twitter does give that boost. So it's important to have that happy medium, and that's what my professor wanted to emphasize. And each person was supposed to choose a platform of their choice. I chose Twitter, and our midterm was actually to gain 30 new followers, and I was able to gain 100. So I was like, hey, maybe this Twitter thing isn't that bad of an idea. Maybe I could do something more with it. And it was definitely trial and error trying to find my voice, which is something you're constantly doing no matter where you are and whichever platform you are, because it definitely feels like you might have a voice on Instagram, but then you have an entirely different voice on Twitter. Maybe you're like very hipster and dark and like post dark academia pictures on Instagram, and then on Twitter you're all rainbows and butterflies. So it was a lot of finding out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to help, and the big why. Why are you doing this? And at first, it was again about promoting Latinx writers in young adult books. So that's how I started out. And because I had an Instagram that's dedicated entirely to books, which is called the Latinx Book Corner, throwing it out there. I lots of good stuff. But it started out definitely with because Nina Moreno, she had written Don't Date Rosa Santos for that time. So I started promoting that. And then I started interacting with a lot of those writers from the community. And then I was able to do an internship with Las Musas, which is a collection of female identifying Latinx writers. So it started in that length. And then I remember one day I was writing a spec of One Day at a Time. And I tweeted Gloria Calderon Kellett that a lot of what I had written in my spec was in season 3. So I had to do it over for my class because my professor was like, oh, but this all happened. And I was like, it's not my fault. I didn't know they were going to do all that. I just wanted to write something. So I tweeted that, and then she responded. And then for a while, I was like, oh, you can actually talk to these people that you admire. So I started creating that kind of environment where I was reaching out to more writers in film and TV. And then eventually I started to see myself as an actual writer trying to get into film and television. So that's mostly how I got into that specific environment. And then I remember I followed La Lista, And then you were constantly posting and uplifting all these awesome people. And then I started connecting with them. And then the meet and greet that you made really helped, because after that, I started noticing a lot of more people out there doing the job and putting their effort. And it was so admirable. And I was able to make this tiny little community for myself thanks to a lot of people that I met through you. So I'm very grateful for that, because where I am right now on Twitter has been because of you and all the people I met through you. So that, like, I'm very grateful for that. And thank you so much for creating that space and creating this space that we're on right now. Because again, I wouldn't know a lot of these people without you.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm accepting the compliment. But, I tell people that all the time. It's like, you're looking for Latinx writers, just go through the people I follow and constantly retweeting, because I'm constantly keeping an eye out on who's doing what they're up to, and always supporting them. And it's like, if you're busy, if you're hustling, if you're doing the thing, even if you're talking about doing the thing, that's already more than most people are doing. Like, it was more than I was doing like 3 years ago. So, our Twitter, our meet and greets are there for the opportunity for y'all to do what you already are doing and connect with each other. And that's what I've noticed about you. It's like, you're definitely like seeing an opportunity and grabbing it. And
yeah,
I think a lot of people talk themselves out of it, like, are a little uneasy. People are constantly talking to me like, how do I like meet more writers? And I'm like, just talk to them on Twitter. Like, that's how you get to know each other. And I was happy to facilitate everyone meeting face to face, because I think that's the hardest part for some of us Twitter trolls. But it's already there. It's just like, this is just like a cute little like nexus where everything intersects and you can all meet each other. But I see you're doing the same thing. I'm a big fan of everything that's going on.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of the opportunities that I've gotten have been through Twitter. I remember I tweeted something the other day, and someone I've never met, but we both live in Puerto Rico, was like, I admire your work. I always see your tweets, and I really like this one. I actually have a friend that works at Amazon Prime, and I'm going to send this to them. And I'm like, what? Why? I'm grateful, but oh my gosh, how like, a lot of things can't happen simply by just being yourself and helping other people. And like, most importantly, a thing I like to emphasize so much is that kindness is so important. Like, if someone is very kind to me, I will I'll return that, but most importantly, I'll cherish it, and I will look out for you. I will, if I see an opportunity that resonates with who you are and what you want to do, I will give you that opportunity. And a lot of my friends say that I'm very generous to a fault, but I can't help it. I just really I want us to succeed, because we rarely get opportunities given to us, and it's very important to look out for each other. But I think the one thing that has helped me so much, like my super secret to Twitter, has been I start seeing people as equals. Like, nobody's above you, nobody is below you. Like, most importantly, no one is below you, but also understand that no one is greater than you. We are all in the same boat. And it's just very important to keep that in mind, and you'll definitely get very far.
It's also just nice to be nice,
Yeah. It's
and
so nice to be nice.
People notice it. Like, no one's gonna retweet if they think you're a jerk. Like, so where can people follow you? So like, where are all now that we've talked about this ad nauseum, like, where can they follow you?
So I was lucky enough to have the same username on 2 places. So I'm at the Josie Marie at Twitter and Instagram. My Bookstagram, if you'd like to follow it for some really good reads, is the LatinX Book Corner on Instagram. Yeah, Film Posers, we're like Film Posers at Film Posers everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, on Twitter, very easy to find.
And so, like, who are some of the writers you admire? So these could be heroes, peers, friends, people you creep on Instagram who don't know who you are. Like,
yes, I definitely love Tania Saracho. I discovered her recently because Maria Meaya, she noticed, I tweeted once that I hadn't seen Vida. So she was like, here's my account, watch it. So I was able to watch Vida, and it was very sad because I watched it after it was canceled. So I was suffering. It was like, no, it's gone. It's like absolutely gone. And I started reading all her interviews to try and find out like what happens to them next, which was, again, it was so sad. But I definitely fell in love with Tanya Saracho's storytelling and the way she writes. And I also started, I geeked out about Tanya Saracho for a while. So I bought a couple of her plays, and those, I've been studying those. So I would definitely say that she is one of my top current working like female, like Latinas in the industry. Specifically to, this is going back to YA, but I love Zoraida Cordova and Nina Moreno. So Zoraida writes, she has a couple of novels in the Star Wars universe, but she also writes fantasy novels. She has a couple like on mermaids, if anyone loves mermaid books, super cool. Then the most recent story is Incendiary, and Illusionary will come out next year, which is like Spanish Inquisition, but with magic and a fantasy world. So it's very interesting. And Nina Moreno, her debut novel was Don't Date Rosa Santos, and it has magical realism, and it's about this young girl that's Cuban American. It's like a lot of identity. So definitely those two, love them. As for peers, I've mentioned her already during this episode, so I really admire Edith Rodriguez. I also absolutely love Amarilis Rodriguez, and you've interviewed them both, so that's awesome. And I also love Helga Fontañez, which I met again through you. I just absolutely love her. So kind and so nice. And because of you, we're actually collaborating on a feature script. So that's also been very fun. Raymond Arturo Perez, I can't not mention him because I loved just him in general. He was so nice. And he was my mentor for the Read LatinX Writers Initiative. And it's just so easy to bounce off ideas and feedback and just talk with him. So I can't wait to see what else comes from Raymond's work, especially now. Like a little applause because, he was in Selena the series. So that's very exciting. And it's like when someone asks you, what's your favorite movie? And you suddenly forget all the movies you've ever seen in your life. But I think like Nick Rodriguez, Elliot Feliciano, just a lot of nice people out there that I just love and admire.
I'm always curious about people, if you've ever seen like yourself represented, like those little moments when you're watching a film or TV show where you're like, oh, that person's like me. And it doesn't have to be exactly like it, but you're like, somehow, some way you found a piece of yourself like in a story, in a character.
This has been happening to me a lot recently, but I've had these conversations where we're talking about representation, and I've had people bring up like, oh, what are you? Because I don't feel like I've been specifically represented yet. And a lot of our culture from living on the island and being raised here, I haven't seen that yet. But I've gotten a lot of people saying like, what are you talking about? Puerto Ricans have so much representation out there. Like, you guys are the most represented people. And I can see how like it's sort of when a network has a TV show, like the LatinX TV show, and they're like, oh, this is like our LatinX TV show, and we've met the quota, the list, like the checklist is marked, we're good. So sometimes I feel like people think, oh, you have Lin-Manuel Miranda, you have J-Lo, you have Bad Bunny. Is it like you're set? And it gets a little bit tiring sometimes because I think there's more to it than that. It's usually like, for example, with Mexican culture, sometimes right now it's Selena. It's like, oh, you have Selena, but there's more to it. There's so many people from so many different cultures that live and breathe and have different experiences from different parts of the United States, but also across South America and the Caribbean. And it's just the whole concept of we are not a monolith, and there's also different ways that we look like and different ways that we present ourselves to the world and different ways that we love people and we express who we are. So it's just a very complicated form to try. It's a very complicated question, but I do often see myself in like, it's a controversial movie, but I remember the first time that I was like going back to like when I wanted to be a writer, definitely The Help. Just, it was the first time that my mom understood why I wanted to be a writer, just seeing how Emma Stone's character just wanted to be like that serious writer, and that's what she wanted to do. I just really love The Princess and the Frog. I just love, I see Tiana and I'm like, I love the strength and the determination and just going after what you want, and how her father tells her like, oh, that star can only take you half the way. So I think those two.
Yeah. No. And I think you're right in terms of like Puerto Ricans. I think we have like, because I'm from Chicago, I thought I knew what Puerto Ricans were like. Then you meet like New Yorkers and you meet people from the island. And it's like whole different universes exist within those like identities. And like, yeah, I don't even think we scratched the surface on like the island and everything and all the possibilities.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there's like when it comes to Chicanos and Mexicans in East LA, I'm pretty sure those are so different, very different experiences.
With my last question, I like to have the writers help me title the episode. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer, and you can put as many words as you want in the blank. You can mix them all around, just whatever feels true to you, your writing, this conversation. I also use it as a community building tool. So somewhere someone will be out there being like, oh, that's like me. I should listen to this. This is also my story. This is a writer I can relate to.
Again, I like to wear so many hats. I like to do so many things, but I think I'm going to go with some words that people have often used to describe me. Oftentimes, I'll just get like a passionate, resilient, cosmic Latinx writer.
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the pod. This was such a fun conversation. It's finally, like you mentioned, like it's great to meet people through all the things I do. I also enjoy it. I get to see everyone. So it's great to finally have a conversation with you. I've been a big fan for a while.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was so happy when we were able to like set this up, because I definitely admire your podcast. I listen to it all the time. I love instantly you post about someone, I'm like,